Welcome to this video from Zimmer and Peacock. So this video is about digitizing vanadium redox flow batteries, or VRFBs. The purpose of this video is actually to show a stack of technologies from Zimmer and Peacock that can really sort of measure the health, the state of health and the state of charge of such flow batteries. Now here I sort of show a potentiostat on the tip of my finger. And the reason I show this is because in order to understand the state of charge and the state of health, and essentially digitize sort of the state of that battery at any one time, then it's important to have elements such as analytical electrodes, electronics, connectivity to the cloud able to receive data, and of course, as I show in this finger, those electronics, it's an advantage to be intrinsically small. Both from a cost perspective and also from a perspective of sort of getting into the right location. But let me go a little bit deeper into this now. So at ZP, our background is very strong in terms of electroanalytical chemistry. And so, techniques that would historically been trapped in the lab, let's say amperometry and voltammetry, through the use of these very small potentiostats and also the whole stack of technologies that we have, we're able to bring amperometry and voltammetry and potentiometry and impedance spectroscopy out of those lab situations. So if people have been building these flow batteries or flow cells over years and they've been gathering lots of characterization data, it's great because we can then interpret or look at that historical data, look at those method files, and actually then apply it to something that's intrinsically much smaller. And I will essentially dive into that a little bit deeper now. So we do understand and in this particular video we are talking about vanadium flow batteries, and what I'm going to say is that we understand that there's sort of a compartment separated by a membrane, and we understand that during discharge then there's a sort of diffusion or migration of protons across this membrane, and there's a state in the oxidation state of the vanadium atoms, and therefore the battery sort of discharging, and we're getting useful energy in terms of this electron flow around the external electrical circuit. But if I was going to be asked the question, what's the state of health of this particular battery? Here I'm showing the sort of flow through cell. Then I think, and not think, but it's a statement that impedance spectroscopy is a really good way of understanding the kind of the electrodes, the membranes, and the anode and cathode, both electrodes, I should say, in this particular flow cell. So impedance spectroscopy plays a role there. If we want to answer the question, what is the state of these oxidized species in these holding tanks? And when I say that, I mean both sides as well, the sort of the anodic chamber and the cathodic chamber. Then you can use techniques like, you could use open circuit potential, which is obviously a potentiometric technique, or you could use voltammetry, and under that, we obviously have cyclovoltammetry, square wave voltammetry, differential pulse voltammetry. And so once upon a time, you would have probably done that kind of characterization, maybe in a sort of academic setting or lab setting, but actually you can bring that kind of analysis out now into the field. So once upon a time, you would have kind of calculated or estimated the state of charge in one of these flow batteries by essentially kind of making some assumptions about the coulometric efficiency when doing a sort of charge and discharge, let's say, cycle. But now actually you can do that charge and discharge cycle. You can sort of estimate what you think the oxidation state is in any particular side of this, let's say, flow cell. But actually you can go in there with voltammetry and really know what it is. And so again, it does come down to that ability to have that small potentiostat. Now, as I said earlier on, that if I want to know the state of health of this particular flow cell, then we can sort of implement a very small kind of potentiostat. And I will show in a bit that these potentiostats are then able to sort of Bluetooth connect essentially to smart devices, and we can use that to then send the data to the cloud. So we can make impedance measurements upon these kind of cells and actually interpret that then as a and it didn't have to be something as simple as this equivalent circuit. I appreciate with these kind of cells, you know, there's sort of, if I could describe it as sort of two semicircles, often in their impedance spectrum when looking in the Nyquist plot, and that tells us sort of complexity of that particular circuit. But that said, we know that obviously using impedance spectroscopy, we can know something about the condition of the electrolyte. We know we can know something about the condition of the solutions. We know we can know something about the conditions of the membrane, and we know we can know something about the conditions of the electrode surface. And basically, you can plot those things as a function of time, and actually say, you know, what is the state of health of, for example, the membrane. You know, and if the membrane's impedance suddenly goes super high, then you know that you may have a problem with it. And also at the same time, if it goes super low, it may have pierced for some way. So impedance spectroscopy is probably a good way of knowing about the actual electrochemical flow cell itself. And as you can see, that sort of little impedance spectrometer actually is a sort of game changer in the ability to take what was a technique that was otherwise reserved for the laboratory and actually put it out into let's say the real world. And if I was to ask a question or ask myself the question,
welcome to
let me just pause that. If to ask the question, how would I know the speciation? So I'm being talking about the state of health of that flow cell. If I wanted to answer another question, which could be, for example, what's the sort of oxidation state of the molecules in my reservoirs, then actually Zimmer-Peacock would traditionally answered it with this stack of technologies, which is, you know, we have a lot of access to low-cost electrodes. This is what we manufacture, and we also have our SenseltAll meter here, which is essentially able to do techniques like square wave voltammetry, differential pulse voltammetry, cyclic voltammetry. We have the ability to create apps on smart devices. And so at any one time, we can sort of tell the meter to do its particular voltammogram. As long as there's a sample on this sensor, then essentially the app will collect the data. And actually then we'll send that data to a cloud that we have. So we have an in-house built proprietary database called Julie. Julie, by the way, does have an API, an application program interface built into it. So we can actually take the data off the smart device, put it to the cloud, and then you can make a call upon our cloud and actually have like data and timestamp, etc. And in the cloud, we can convert the raw electrochemical signal into something meaningful, like a concentration in millimole or ppm, depending on how the sort of battery engineers actually want that served up. Now here we're showing the idea that you would actually be sampling. But it's also probably worth saying that we have equivalent technology where in fact we have these sensors within sampling devices or flow streams. So, you know, in a more sort of industrialized setting where you're not going to go in there and you're not going to send an engineer in there to collect the sample, do a quick test and send the data to the cloud. No, actually we're going to have the sensor in a sort of little flow cell. And so at the heart of this, there is a electrode, we'll call it sensor, in the heart of this, and we're able to sort of pull samples from a reservoir and put them over the sensor. In this case, we're sending the sample to waste, but you could also recirculate it as well. So if I want to answer the question, what's the sort of ratio of oxidized and reduced material in a particular tank, then voltammetry would be a good way of doing that. And the nice thing about the electrodes that we use here, it's electrodes that we otherwise use in many other applications. So it allows us to produce these kind of electrodes at a really low cost price. So that's actually the same platform as previously, except now the electronics are on the board here. The sensor is attached to the electronics to a cable, and so we've had the sensor kind of in the flow stream as opposed to bringing the sample to the sensor. And I have it sort of running again here. I'll just pause that. And if we just give a quick anatomy lesson on this, then you can see that we have the sample reservoir, We have pumps to sort of bring out the sample, valves so we can sort of switch the direction of flow and send it in different directions to waste, for example, or to recirculation. And then we also have the sensor in there as well. So that's another, let's say, configuration of our SenseltAll platform. And SenseltAll for us just means sensor to API. We have a sensor, we have electronics, we have connectivity to the cloud, we have the cloud itself, and then we have that API that sits in the cloud as well. And you can see that we're using the same type of sensor here. And you can also get a sense that sensors can actually be, these can be quite harsh environments, so we can see that the sensors can sort of be removed and replaced. And I wouldn't worry about, we'll be concerned about the cost of the sensors themselves. And then as you can see, it's the same electronics as well. So it's an idea that we can measure the state of health of a flow battery using a technique like impedance spectroscopy. And our SenseltAll platform, especially that very small potentiostat, would be an ideal little tool to be kind of in that or next to that flow cell, measuring the impedance of the electrodes and the electrolyte and the membranes. But then actually knowing like state of charge, which is, you could do it through voltammetry. Then we can use the voltammetric methods, but it's still the SenseltAll platform. But now we have the electrodes, for example, sampling from the holding reservoirs. And this is just kind of showing you that we have these apps, and we're able to kind of present this data remotely and really on any kind of dashboard, as long as somebody actually has a phone. It's probably worth saying as well that our cloud database, which kind of receives all this data, is a little bit smarter than just a repository for electrochemical data. It has a lot of analytics built in. This is a technology that's easily been in development at ZP for over 9 years. This is quite useful because it's actually showing that it can handle impedance spectroscopy. And it's a little bit smarter than that, because actually if it's got Nyquist data, it's actually able to, this is more useful for the R&D scientists, but it actually can suggest equivalent circuits as well. So if I was to kind of summarize this, at ZP we do have a whole platform called SenseltAll, where we have sensors, electronics, connectivity to smart devices. Smart devices connect to our cloud, and our cloud will do analytics. It'll save the data, and it will allow you to make an API call upon our data, or our database rather, and then you can serve the data up in your own cloud. And it's sort of the involvement of ZP's technology is kind of blind to the final user. So we do have nice electronics, and this particular electronics is a nice identification of that. We do have the cloud system as well, which has easily been 9 years in development. I think it's the only sort of data management system, or not proprietary, but commercial data management system specific for electrochemical type data. And of course, if you have any questions, I would just say don't hesitate to contact us. Okay, thanks very much.